around or to be linked to an implementation of another policy. So the second bulletin, basically what it says is that for institutional reform to take place, there has to be strengthened institutional capacity at the intermediate or meso level. And there have to be concerted efforts at both the top and down levels of a society. Recall what we said about appreciating each other's strength and value that they bring into the water and sanitation governance and also water and sanitation provision of the services. So with regards to institutions, the institutional reforms should ensure that key policies, laws, and strategies are aligned sector by sector and translated into plans and actions. This is exactly what we said yesterday, that we should try as much as possible to avoid non-coherent policies or to avoid policies which are contradicting each other, because it makes implementation, practically impossible. So basically, we are sort of repeating what we mentioned yesterday, but just in different form and format and words. So let us briefly look at the concepts of key terms. Institutions. Various theorists have concerned themselves with the study of institutions, including the provision of the definition of the term. But as for many definitions, to date, there is no consensus on the definition of the institutions. And endless disputes over the definition of institution have led some of the scholars to give up on the matter of definition, but propose getting down on somehow to practical matters instead. This is a choice, somebody's choice, that since definition is not consensus, so they're going to get down into the operational or practical matters. But what we're arguing here is, unless we know what institutions are, it might be a bit difficult to discuss institutional reforms. And we are not bound to a particular definition, but we will use a definition that makes sense to us and in the context of water and governance. Water and sanitation governance. So literature informs us that institutions can be defined as rules and regulations that guide human behavior. And under this definition follows the legal documents like constitutions, statutory instruments, legislative acts, customary laws, etc. A scholar known as North, in his publication of 1990, for example, defined institutions as the rules of the game in a society, or more formally, as the human devised the constraints that shape human behavior. Institutions, therefore, that is the rules of the game, can either be formal, according to North, can be formal, for instance, constitutional rules like political system, parliamentary legislation, laws, property rights, etc.
Okay, now I have to say.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello, I think there was someone who was not muted.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
Now, can I continue now?
Yes, please continue.
All right. I'll go to slideshow again. Where is it? Here. So the institutions can also be informal, for instance, typical unwritten codes of conduct, such as behavioral norms, actors, taboos, traditional values, and sanctions that underlie and support formal rules. And when it comes to issues of water, especially in the say rural areas, more often than not, you find unwritten codes of conduct, but still people practice the same. For instance, in some places you find it's not written, but everybody practices the fact of refraining to going to the water sources during afternoon. For instance, from around 12 to around 3 in the afternoon. There are in some cultures, you are not allowed to visit or to use water sources during that time, 12 to around 2 or 3. You find it being practiced while it's not even written anywhere. I remember when I used to visit my grandma, my maternal grandma, this was the rule. You know, as kids, sometimes you want to go to the well or to the river, and you are told this time around you can't go, and there is no one who is allowed to go. But we as learned people can think the reason why. You know, this is the time when if you use water for especially maybe watering the garden, there's a high level of water loss through vapor because of the heat and the sun is upright. So much as at that time, nobody explained to us, but as you grow up and you understand these things, you figure out they had a scientific reason to forbidding people to using water at that particular time, although it was not written anywhere, but still people were practicing what was supposed to be practiced. So basically my point is in the informal institutions, you find more often than not codes of conduct and behavioral norms and taboos that are cleaned on and practiced, but are not written anywhere. But if you think through them, you find there's a scientific reason behind. And other authorities consider institutions as organizations that regulate human behavior and action. So based on this view, some scholars use the terms institution and organization interchangeably. Selznick, for instance, equated institutions to organization, and the argument was that institutional processes view organizations as adaptive, organic systems affected by the social characteristics of their participants, as well as the variable pressure from the environment, and that organizations to a variable extent and over time are transformed into institutions. However, institutions, according to some scholars, should not be confused with organizations. Organizations are considered as the operationalization of the institutions by some, and being an organization, the firm is typically manifestation of a constellation of institutions. But this depends on how you look at institution and organization. And literature informs us more that there's a distinction between organizations and institutions. And this has been considered useful for purposes of academic debate and theory only. But in real practice, both institutions, which is the rules of the game, and organizations, which are firms, are very essential to the development of water resources. And they complement each other in terms of transforming objectives into action, and the two terms interchangeably are tolerable. And it's agreed that there is no organization that can effectively survive without making use of certain rules of the game.
Bro.
Yeah?
The slides are not moving.
They are not moving, so Which number are you?
Okay, we're not seeing the number. The one where you talk about the taboos, that's where there's that slide. Behavioral norms, actors, taboos, traditional value, that's the slide we are on.
Wow, that's number 6. Okay, let me try and share again. I tell you these things. Now I'm not even seeing my own presentation.
Yes, I can see.
Does it bear a number?
Yes, I can see there's a number there.
Okay, now let me try and locate where we were.
This way you left us.
Oh, sorry. So now are you able to see number 7?
Yes.
Okay. I said when you are not able to see the slides that some scholars equate organizations and institutions, especially the researcher known as Cisnik, and his argument was that institutional processes view organizations as adaptive, organic systems affected by the social characteristics of their participants, as well as the variable pressure from the environment and the organization to a variable extent and over time are transformed into institutions. But others also argue that institutions should not be confused with organizations. And they argued that organizations are considered to be the operationalization of the institutions. And being an organization, the firm is the physical manifestation of a constellation of institutions. Are we moving together? Hello?
Yes, Prof. Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then literature informs of the distinction between organizations and institutions. But they think this distinction is mostly considered for the purposes of academic debate and theories only. They think in real practice, both institutions, which are referred to as rules of the game, and organizations, which are referred to as firms, are very essential to the development of water resources. And they complement each other in terms of transforming objectives into action, and the two terms are interchangeably tolerable. And literature informs us that there is no organization that can effectively survive without making use of certain rules. And on the other hand, the rules of the game are useless if there is no organization to interpret and apply them judicially. Scholars Leach and colleagues argue that if institutions are the rules of the game in a society, then organizations may be thought of as players or groups of individuals bound together by some common purpose to achieve objectives. And organizations exist only because there's a set of working rules or underlying institutions that define and give those organizations meaning. So to this end, we are convinced to believe that institutions are actually a set of working rules. I'm sure you have experienced sometimes in our organizations a practice being introduced, and little by little it is institutionalized. It does not only become maybe a practice for a particular group, but it is institutionalized, meaning it's applicable to the entire organization. Organizations are social systems with goals and procedures that tend to achieve an established value and status. And over time, they become institutionalized, as I said earlier on. The social systems with goals and procedures over time are institutionalized. So for instance, view it this way. Institutionalization is a process that occurs to an organization over time, reflecting the organization's own history and people who have been in it, the groups it embodies, and the vested interest they have created. So this is what exactly I said. You start practicing something in the organization, little by little, it becomes institutionalized. It also reflects how the organization adapts to its environment. As the organization institutionalizes, it also makes input into the development and modification of the rules of the game. Thus, new rules have the potential to transform the organization, and an evolving organization has the potential to change the existing rules. As organizations acquire certain predictable modes of operation, they become institutionalized, and they need to distinguish between institutions and organization at this point now becomes irrelevant, because the organization has now institutionalized some modes of operation, and therefore organization and institution can be looked at as one, and at this point the distinction is not relevant. So what is the institutional change? The change means something that happens to shape the way society evolves. Institutions reduce uncertainty by providing structure to everyday life. They are the guidelines of human interactions and the processes of resource allocation, and they determine who gets what, when, and how. And they play a big role in the division of power between and among humans. And the key word here is that institutional change shapes the way society evolves. In terms of evolving, changes have to happen because power between and among humans can now be shared. Society or an organization can try and strike a balance in power relations, and that results into institutional change. And there's what is known as institutional arrangement. Institutional arrangements are actually set of working rules that are used to determine who is eligible to make decisions in some areas and what actions are allowed and what actions are restrained. So basically, it's the arrangement of that particular organization. You have rules because you see, even in a small group, there has to be somebody who takes the lead. That's the arrangement. Somebody who can determine or can lead discussion to determine who does what, who is eligible for what. So that's the arrangement. Institutional arrangements specifically specify actions required or prohibited and corresponding probable penalties for non-compliance and which actions are permitted. And for us to have practical implementation of the institutional reforms, we have to have sanctions. If we are saying, for instance, don't go to water sources between 12 and 2, it shouldn't just end there. There has to be sanctions. We must, as much as possible, avoid to become something one might call toothless dogs. That is a dog which can't bite. You have rules, but then you don't have any explanation as to what will happen to somebody who doesn't follow the agreed upon rules, which means for me, who abides what has been stipulated and agreed upon, and for one who doesn't follow through, we are just the same in a community. That can become a disincentive for people to practice and follow through what has been agreed upon. So basically the point here is penalties must be stipulated for non-compliance. And further, the rules describe what procedures must be followed, what information must or must not be provided, and what payoffs will be assigned to offended individuals. This again speaks to sanctions, but it also speaks to restrictions, notably on the information that can and cannot be shared, or information which must or must not be shared. And then in the institutional reform, there's a term known as decentralization. And this is the process of bringing decision-making process closer to the people or citizens. And this actually relates to challenges we covered yesterday that have been observed in some places following the implementation of the IWRM, where decentralization is taking place and things are done at the local level in the local context. That is decentralization, bringing decision-making process closer to the people or citizens. And in other words, decentralization can be viewed as making the state more responsive to regional and local needs than has been the case in the past, with the concentration of administrative power and responsibility in the central state. Maybe I should engage participants a little bit on the dangers of decentralization. You can speak about water issues or sanitation, or generally, what do you perceive as challenges of decentralization? Firstly, I think we must agree decentralization at times is important, but then what are the possible problems or challenges that decentralization can bring about? The floor is yours. Whoever is ready to share the views with us, kindly let us know. Mm-hmm.
Morning, Pro. Morning, Pro.
Morning, morning.
Morning, colleagues. I
Morning.
think one of the challenges is if you're dealing with, say, in a rural setup, don't have people who are qualified or understand the subject matter that's being attended to. Road decisions might be made which may not result into the intended purpose of the project, whatever undertaking one wants to do.
So, thank you, Mumbe. Did you talk about the capacity? Did I get
capacity?
Capacity. Definitely, capacity is one of the challenges that we can face in the implementation of or operationalization of decentralization. Any other idea?
Good morning, Prof. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
It's Faith. Yes. So I'm not 100% sure, but this is another challenge that I've heard in some circles. I think this has mainly been in South Africa, where they say that well, there's a decentralization in terms of mandates, but then not necessarily an equal decentralization or devolution of the funds, such that the smaller municipalities or your B and C municipalities then become overburdened with responsibilities. And as a result, you find that metros or the bigger municipalities that contribute much to the GDP are also getting much in terms of like the supporting resources. So then that further perpetuates the differences between the municipalities that are able and those that are a bit marginalized. Yeah.
Thank you, Faith. So far we have the issue of capacity, because once you have been given power at the central level, you are expected to sort out yourself, and you may find you as a maybe leader in that particular context, you have people whose capacity is a little bit questionable. And you are right, funds. We have already decentralized, so you guys are on your own, and you might find yourself facing challenges in terms of funds. Any other idea? Another disadvantage that we mentioned, or challenge actually, that we mentioned yesterday was with regards to coordination. The whole coordination issue can become quite challenging, because human beings have this urge, majority of us have the urge to just be in a position to do things on our own, especially given the opportunity. So you have maybe 10 subdivisions, you can imagine, and you have decentralized, and people are doing things on their own. Of course, you will have those who abide to rules and regulations, but you will also have those who decide to diverge from the normal line. But the whole point is, literature informs us of the challenge of decentralization as the difficult in coordination. And what would be the advantages, for instance? What do you think will be the advantage of decentralization? advantage of decentralization. We have seen there just the 3 challenges or problems that may emanate from decentralization. But surely there has to be advantage. That's why it's being
Prof.
practiced. Yes, please.
Yeah, good morning, Prof. Good morning, everyone. I think the one that I think you also mentioned it is that the services are closer to the people and they get a faster response on their queries.
Mm-hmm. You are right. Is it Makaben or Menare?
Yes, Menare.
You are right. There's a literature has proved and research has proved to the fact that there's efficient communication when there's decentralization, and services are closer to the people, and actually there is motivation, especially to subordinates when they are doing things at their central, at their level. Literature informs that it has motivated people, especially subordinates, and it has also eased expansion. This might be attributed to what Menari said, the easy communication and interaction. When they want to expand, because the system is decentralized, it's easy for them to expand, as opposed to when we are applying centralization system, whereby they have to go through these hierarchies until somebody approves, or at times even disapproves what they wanted to do. And therefore, there's a potential for growth. There's also potential for diversification. So generally, decentralization is not bad, because when you think of the advantages, they outweigh the disadvantages. The biggest challenge that has to be overcome is the coordination. And where there's smooth coordination under decentralization, you should also expect, flow of funds, because if you coordinate properly, you are expected to involve these people, for them also to air their views with regards to what resources they want. And you should take that on board, their requirements, of course, within what is available. And if there is an effective and meaningful coordination, even the challenge that I think it was Mumbe who mentioned of capacity can be addressed. As you coordinate, means you involve meaningfully these people, and they share their challenges, and you take them and see how best you can assist them. Another disadvantage that has been mentioned in literature of decentralization is it becomes expensive. It becomes more expensive, I guess, because there has also to be a component of coordination within the local area, so to say. So the coordination issue and the other maybe admin or costs, overhead. Now they become many in these small units. So at the end, it becomes an expensive exercise, but still, excuse me, most of the organizations are moving away from centralization, but coordination becomes a problem, especially where you might have somebody who wishes to just be a king or queen of the area. So that was about decentralization. And then there's something called we said decentralization. Yeah, this we mentioned already. Is the process of bringing process of bringing decision-making processes closer to the people or citizens. And in other words, it can be viewed as making the state more responsible to regional and local needs than has been the case in the past, with the concentration of administrative power and responsibility in the central state. And decentralization process that took place in many countries served to transfer responsibilities for water issues to lower tiers of government and promote better coordination at the local and national level. And then there's another terminology.
Prof,
It's called, yes.
we had
We're not
slide
moving
15. We had 15.
You are on 15.
Mm.
And I'm on 14.
All along when we discussed it, we've been on slide 15.
Did I take you back to 14?
No, we are on 15. When the colleagues were contributing, the slide that was on us is number 15, agendization.
So you haven't looked at number 14 at all.
We must have passed it already.
Let me see if we're going back together. Are you on 13?
No, still 15.
Hey,
I can see 13 though. From my side, it says institutional arrangements, where it ends up with a quotation from Ostrom in 1990. That's the one I'm seeing on the screen.
Catherine?
And then 14.
For
Have
me,
you moved it? For you?
For me, it's agentization.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's on agentization.
Yeah. The same
15.
Let me go to slideshow and see. Are you seeing 14, all of you?
15.
15.
15. I'm not sure what's happening with technology today.
I tell you, what is going on? Let me stop sharing and share again so we can be all on the same page.
Thank you.
Okay. Yay. Technology can be something.
And I think it's made worse with our slow networks as well.
Yeah, now it's fine.
What do you mean by fine? Where are you?
Decentralization, 14.
Oh, 14. All right. So now let's move together. Are you all on the Argentinization?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So this, as the name itself reads, is when you get an agent to do something for you. This is the delegation or assignment of government functions to a public entity or agency, such as a catchment management agency or water body. And an agency can take on either a centralized or decentralized function. Because when you hire an agent, then they are at liberty to practice whichever mode, centralized or centralized form, unless in the contract you explain to them, you tell them which mode to apply. But since they're the ones who are doing things, it might be quite challenging. But anyway, the definition is when you get some agent to do things for you. Institutional development at the global level in the context of water and sanitation. Literature informs us that management of water and sanitation require effective institutional management. As we have seen from day one of this module, we are part of the globe, and whatever we do, by and large, is informed of the international thinking or approaches or agreed upon terms. So what literature informs us is that effective institutional management is required for management of water and sanitation. And such arrangement promotes the effective management, resolves the conflicts at national, regional, and even international levels, and promotes cooperation, coordination, and solidarity in the management of water resources. And in the context of our own area of specialization, the water issues, honestly, effective management is important because water at times knows no boundary. Water at times knows no boundary. And therefore, if we don't have a good and effective management system, institutional management in place, we can easily find ourselves in conflict, which can escalate into wars and loss of lives. And this can be in national, regional, and even international levels. I'm sure we have heard of cases where people are fighting for water within a nation, within a particular country, and conflicts arise and, problems are encountered by people because of, are struggling for water or water resources. So institutional management, effective institutional management is particularly important to ensure that conflicts are resolved, because we have to remember there's no institutional management that can stop conflicts from happening. By nature, there are people who would just like to cross over to your place and say, this is mine, whilst it's not theirs. So there's no institutional management that can stop conflicts, but rather effective institutional management should be in place to resolve conflicts at various levels that we have mentioned there. But also institutional management should be in place to promote cooperation. When you cooperate, you minimize chances of conflict, and even when conflicts happen, you are in a better position to resolve conflicts if you are in a cooperation. I keep on drawing an example of our own region. I'm not seeing any of the member states of SADC getting into a conflict that will escalate and escalate and escalate to an extent that things are taking a bad shape. Why? Because we are in cooperation. We have our own protocols and rules and regulations that guide us. Should there arise any conflict, because we are in cooperation and there are effective institutional management systems in place, it's very easy to resolve the conflict, at times amicably, without having to lose lives or without having to see things getting in bad shape. An effective institutional management also promotes coordination and solidarity in the management of water resources management. And I keep on saying our own region is a case in point where institutional management is in place and things are happening the way we expect them to be. So as noted, effective management is achieved through the formulation of rules, policies, strategies, and laws by water institutions. As we said earlier on, rules have to be there and people have to abide and play by the rules. Policies to guide have also to be in place, but also strategies, because you can't have policy and expect it to implement it and achieve the policy objectives in the absence of strategies. And laws must also be in place. And something that has not been mentioned, but I'm sure you and I agree, is that sanctions also must be in place. And probably in the context of rules, policies, and laws, maybe sanctions are also mentioned. I'll give you a fun example. In my university, the University of Dar, of which my college is part of, we passed, I don't know whether it's a rule or a policy, maybe rather a policy of one paper per year. which means all academic staff are supposed, not expected, are supposed to publish one paper a year. But we all know publishing a paper in a year is not an easy task. Some papers, you know, in certain outlets, they take 2 years to get published. But the point I want to make is the absence of sanctions. So one day in these high meetings of the university, somebody asked, he's a member but from another university, said, okay, this rule is good, this policy is good, but then what happens if I don't publish? And then we started looking at each other. No sanction has been put in place. And firstly, some policies are not even practical. So we're not expecting this to be happening in areas of water and sanitation, because rules, policies, and strategies, even laws, they must be practical. They must be practical, and sanctions must be clearly stated. So if, for instance, a member state decides to go against what has been stipulated, then they should be aware ahead of time the consequences, what are the consequences of their action. So to me, effective institutional management must also include sanctions. And at times, sanctions are the ones which make people abide to what has been agreed. But if you don't have sanction, then people might decide whether to do or not to do whatever had been agreed upon. The existence of water in an international basin or shared water resources creates the need for an international, regional, and national integration process in the management of such basins or water sources. This is something we all know and we have experienced. I keep on saying, because we are in the context of SADC, that we have the regional body that brings us together to manage these shared water causes or resources or basins. So water can be both a source of cooperation as nations sign agreements to manage the common water resources, or a source of conflict where interested parties betray each other in the use of common water resources. I think this makes a lot of sense to us all, and it doesn't need much explanation. It's just a choice of a particular stakeholder. In this particular case, a particular state deciding to betray, deciding to go against for their own reasons. And therefore, water can be, we would say, a curse or a blessing. A blessing in the sense that it brings cooperation and collaboration, but a curse if others decide to do what is not expected. And no one is going to put up with them betraying the group. At international level, we have the United Nations, we have the GWP, we have the World Water Council, and the World Commission of Dams, which provide an international institutional framework for the management of water resources. As we keep saying, we don't live in a vacuum. We are part of the globe. So we have to be aware of which bodies exist at international levels that provide institutional framework for management of water resources management. Yes, I mean, you can't be a graduate with your PhD and then you don't know any international level institutional framework for management of water resources. And these, I'm sure you have come across their documents up to the level that you are now. The UN agencies, for example, have played various leading roles in promoting and establishing regional international cooperation in water resources management through the provision of financing, organization of water conventions, settlement of water-related conflicts, among others. And from day one, we have been mentioning of the need for funds, need for financial resources for countries to be able to invest adequately in water and sanitation services. So you see the benefits of having these international level bodies. One of the benefits is provision of funds. But again, conventions are organized within the international level. And then settlement of water-related conflicts among states. It's among the many roles that are played by the international level. And honestly speaking, unless a country has big problems, many would not like to be isolated from the international community. So even when two states enter into antagonism or conflict because of water resources, when the international community comes in to mediate, it's very likely that they would listen to, other than they listen to each other. The UN agencies which are involved in the management of water include UNDP, the UNEP, and the UNEC. There is also World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, that's UNESCO, which so far we have mentioned in the course of the 3 days that we're covering the module 5. We found UNESCO has brought into an important aspect in water and sanitation governance that had not been brought up by any other organizations that we have covered so far, the issue of culture. So UNESCO is one of the important stakeholders in water and sanitation governance. And some of the outstanding activities of the UN that have affected the global management of water resources include the UN-sponsored Mar del Plata Plan of Action that happened in 1977, which declared the International Drinking Water Decade. There is the Dublin Declaration and the Rio Agenda 21 of 1992, which outlined the principles that we are aimed at transforming the management of water resources in the world. And I'm sure as scholars and specialists in the water area, we have come across here and there with these activities by the UN. And they inform what we are doing at our local and regional levels. The principles, among other things, they recognize water, of course, as an economic good and proposes involvement of women and the use of an integrated approach in the management of water resources management. So these principles that are stipulated or put forward by the international bodies, particularly the UN, as I said earlier, they inform states what to do, which approach to utilize with regards to management of water resources. And the GWP and WWC appeared in the 1996, intending to facilitate the achievement of the goals expressed in the Mar del Plata Water Conference and the Dublin Water Conference, and also the Earth Summit in Rio that was taking long to be achieved. So another role is for some of these organizations to come in and figure out or find out or establish implementation of the agreed proposal or goals, achievement of goals that had been agreed upon. So the creation of these institutions has been criticized by some water communities who felt they shared the similar goals, creating duplication of meetings and competition for funding from them. Now, this is another challenge in the institutional management. There's a danger if people are not very careful. There's a danger of duplication. And if we duplicate effort, it means we are spending funds unwisely. Conflicts were resolved after a serious effort to define their respective characteristics. That is the units or agents which were criticizing each other, and they identified the individual missions and strengths and work together as much as possible. This again brings me to what I keep on emphasizing, the importance of appreciating each other's effort and strength that they bring in. So in the course of solving the challenge that I just mentioned of, the potential for duplication and misuse of funds, the WWC was agreed that it should focus on raising awareness of water resources management issues, and the GWP would focus on educating users in the developing countries about sustainable water resources management. So you can see there's a difference within the areas of focus of these two organizations. And the success of the two institutions stems from the fact that membership is limited to big organizations or individuals with substantial financial resources. Now, institutional management should also consider issues of finance and limit membership as well, because if all of us are going to be members and we don't have much funds to bring in, we might enter into a chaos that shouldn't have otherwise happened had we thought through of the membership and what members should be able to bring on board. So the success of the institution, as the bullet one reads, was based on the fact that the big institutions have a reliable workforce in pursuing their goals. And the second factor for success is the existence of a sound organization consisting of General Assembly, Board of Directors, Secretariat, and Technical Advisory Committee. So these are variables which attributed to success that had been mentioned. But literature also informs that these organizations are on the developing states, especially the GWP. So they are wondering whether we can actually be able to improve water problems. We're all aware of GWP and what it has done and continues to do so far. So we can speak to... Yes?
Faith hands is up.
Pardon?
Faith's hand is up. The last time it was up, I lowered it. Maybe it is up again. Maybe it's for a reason.
Okay. Yes, Faith.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Yeah, and this is just a reflection on the different institutions and presence of water at that international scale. But what is your view on not having a water COP? You see, climate, because I feel that's the other place in terms of institutional arrangements where it would also be quite effectively coordinated, managed, and like resolutions made at a COP. And I feel that's why there's some traction when it comes to climate change, when it comes to desertification, land degradation and reducing desertification, and the issues of biodiversity, because they've got those COPs. There are specific COPs that like articulate and debate and what at an international level and decisions are made. So water plays second fiddle because they say water filters through all those issues, but it doesn't really stand out on its own. What is your reflection on maybe why we don't have a COP, or do you think it's important to have a water COP? Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. That's a very good observation and question. Honestly speaking, we are bound not to achieve a lot if we tend to have some of the pertinent issues such as water infiltrated in some of the issues such as the environment or climate change and the like. So my point of view would be there is a need to have a water COP, because what will happen at the water COP is different from what, in terms of water, is different from what will happen in the context of water, but in the climate change COP, for instance. So probably it's high time we see how and who can be engaged to start these COPs for water. I am also a stakeholder in the climate change issues, and I have colleagues who go to one COP after another. But I'm not sure, because I've never attended any. I'm not even sure they are able to achieve what they want. Maybe I'll take an interest to look at, for instance, climate change COP 26 and climate change COP 27. What is it that COP 27 is informed or was informed by COP 26? And going back again, how did COP 25, for instance, informed COP 26, and whether there is actually a meaningful development and implementation of what was decided or agreed upon in the other COP. But for me to answer your question, I think water COP is important. You know, there was a time when we had gender issues being looked at as yeah, this is okay. You see, there was a time when we had gender being infiltrated in so many other things, and they used to call it as a cross-cutting issue. And you don't see much happening, because people would meet, for instance, the COP on climate change. People will meet to discuss issues related to climate change as opposed to discussing water. So water can be mentioned as a by agenda or by issue. So from my point of view, if we can lobby and have water COP, I think it will be a good thing. I don't know. Can we hear from others? I'm sure we all know about these COPs. It's a very good thing that Faith has brought up, and we are specialists within the region. Actually, yesterday I forgot to mention, hearing from each one of you what you do and what you have been doing, I thought to myself, well, SADC has resourceful people in the sector. So can I invite anyone to shed lights on the COP issue, if any one of you has something to share? Karibu, welcome. No one for now? Okay, then we'll go to slide number 20, back to 24, and then we'll move to 25. But thank you, Faith. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, thank you. So I think these organizations, or these organizations are somehow questioned, because they are considered to be on the development states, and the funding and clear role definition is also are also factors that make these organizations being questionable. But for us who have interacted with them, we can speak to what they are doing despite the challenges mentioned. Have we moved together to 25? Hello?
I'm still on 24.
You're still on 24. I guess when I get out of the presentation mode, it stacks. From the slideshow, it stacks. I don't know.
Seems like.
But it's easy now. I don't have any problem with the sharing, so I can as well close, stop sharing, and share again, and then we move together. Now I'm an expert. As opposed, first day you should have seen how sweating I was in my office. Time is moving and nothing happens. So are we on 24?
Yes, Prof.
Thank you. The WCD was established in 1997, develops criteria, standards, guidelines to review the effectiveness of large-scale dams and advise future decision makers on dam construction. So basically what they are giving us is the factors that make some of the organizations seem to be performing better than the other. But you know, when you have an organization in place with the roles to play, you don't expect it to maybe achieve as much on the onset or on the establishment. You give it time, it evolves, it grows, and then things will happen as expected. Now, the regional level. At the regional level, we have SADC, which is the key institution that promotes the regional integration process in the management of water resources among states in Southern Africa. SADC coordinates, develops, utilizes, and manages water resources of the region. So it brings us together. We collaborate and manage our resources in a sort of togetherness spirit. And SADC also, the vision of the SADC is to promote the sustainable and equitable development, utilization and management of the water resources, and contribute towards the improvement of the quality of life of the people of the region. Remember, we said if you want to see development, bring water to the people. And when there is water, people will just follow water and development will happen. So it's pleasing also for us to remind ourselves that our regional body aims at improving the quality of life of its people. And some of the strategies for achieving the vision include, for instance, facilitating integrated planning development, facilitating management, and equitable utilization of water resources at both the national and regional levels. SADC also mobilizes financial resources, human and institutional resources for integrated planning, development, management, and equitable utilization of common water resources, and also the implementation of approved regional programs. And also it promotes joint and cross-border investment in water resources development, and also guide cost-sharing arrangements. So you see, their strategies are actually quite sound, if you ask me. For instance, when you have a regional body that has institutional management to effectively assist in the equitable utilization of water resources, it is something good, because if we can't regulate ourselves on the utilization of water resources, then we are bound to get into conflict. This one uses more than the other one, and this and that. But also when you have a body that mobilizes finance resources, financial resources, human and institutional resources for the betterment of water resources management, and approves programs at the regional level, it is something to be commended. And also, we need somebody to promote or assist us to invest in these joint and cross-border water resources development, especially with regards to cost sharing. You know, sometimes even at the household level, the lower levels, you have a plot A and your neighbor has plot B. Sometimes building a border wall between the two of you, some people get into clashes because of the cost sharing arrangement. So you can imagine, and that's just the individual level, you can imagine when states are involved, if we don't have a mechanism in place to regulate us, to guide us with regards to who should bear which costs, and which costs have to be borne by another state. So to achieve the objectives, SADC first of all has formed a protocol for shared water causes among its member states. And the overall objective of the protocol is to foster cooperation for judicious, sustainable, and coordinated management. Protection is also an issue. States should be responsible to protect the water causes, and utilization of shared water causes, and advance the SADC agenda of regional integration and poverty elimination. And second, in 2002, SADC restructured its institutions and grouped the various sectors into 4 directorates. This is the institutional reform that happened in 2002 to ensure that things are done in a more organized manner to achieve intended objectives. So there is a Directorate of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources. Sorry, the water sector fall under the 3 directorates. Under the Directorate of Food, sorry, one Directorate of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources. And all directorates operate from SADC headquarters in Botswana, in Gaborone. And therefore, it means communication is done through newly created SADC national committees instead of the sectoral points. These are reforms that happened to ensure that SADC functions better and is positioned better to achieve intended objectives. But then at the international level, we also have the IUCN, and this is another international organization that was formed in 1948 to bring together states, government agencies, and a diverse range of non-governmental organizations in a unique partnership with 811 members spread across 129 countries. IUCN seeks to influence, encourage, and assist societies across the world to conserve the integrity and diversity of nature, and to ensure that any use of natural resources is equitable and ecologically sustainable. And the organ works towards the conservation of water in the wetlands and water resources programs. So this is another international organization that has institutional management in place to ensure that we conserve water and use it sustainably, especially with regards to ecology. IUCN coordinates and reinforces the activities of the management of wetland and water ecosystems, and the main focus at present is water demand management. IUCN collaborates with the SADC and ZRA to conduct research in selected member states. So it's pleasing to see it's an international organization at international level, but it brings on board sorry. And then the approach is generally to influence changes in water policy, and as such, it makes efforts to work with government ministries that deal with water-related issues. Again, this coordination and involvement that is happening within IUCN underscores my point of giving value and appreciation to other stakeholders. Now, institutional reforms, policy, laws, and amendments. What literature informs us is that since early 1990s, which was triggered by growing scarcity of water and significant alteration of habitat, the international organizations have been urging reform in national water policies and laws. So the changes that are experienced make nations look at their water policies and laws and revise or change them to take on board what challenges had been experienced. And therefore, to achieve sustainable development, there's a need of restructuring the national, legal, and institutional reform, frameworks to ensure that they are appropriate for a new paradigm. The IWRM came into being following the need to reform water national policies and laws. And the current international discourse that is urging reform of national water policies and laws is captured in a series of statements and documents, including the World Water Vision, the World Commission of Dams, the Millennium Development Goals of 2000, and the outcome of the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development. The popular Dublin Declaration, the Paris Declaration, and Ministerial Declaration in Mexico. So this again underscores what I said earlier on. We as member states of SADC are part of the globe, and whatever we decide in regards to institutional reforms has to be informed about by what is happening at the global level. So the international discourse provides ideas and guidelines to be adopted and further developed by national policy and legislations. Of course, we are not necessarily obliged to do exactly what is being said, but we are also not expected to diverge as much. The context issue comes in, but we must be in line with what has been agreed upon at the international level. And the international discourse provides what is known as lingua franca, with which to engage with with the other states to synchronize policies over shared resources. And that principle is in line with the IWRM. and IWRM inspired new sub-Saharan African water policies, acts, and regulations. And among the 4 so-called Dublin principles that we all are aware of, which represent the pillars of IWRM, stakeholder participation is the one calling for river basin management at the lowest appropriate level. So all these things are not new to us. We have seen them being practiced in our places, but the point here is aligning to the international agreed upon approaches. So the design and implementation of water management and allocation policies are transferred from the state to local institutions. That is decentralization, which are supposed to have a better knowledge of the catchment functions and where representatives of the local water stakeholders are allowed to negotiate and decide jointly water management strategies and measures. So can I excuse myself for just 2 minutes? Allowed?
Yes, Prof.
Hello? Thank
Yes,
you.
Prof.
Thank you, thank you. Yes. I'm back now.
Okay, Prof.
Thank you. So this slide basically shows the Dublin principles that I'm sure we all know by heart as of now because we have interacted with them for quite some time. In 1998, literature informs us that water ministers of the Nile Basin countries assembled in Addis Ababa to officially form the Nile Basin Initiative and to take the first steps towards adopting the IWRM principles. And what this bulletin tells us is within regions we can have countries which can be members of another body depending on the resources that are shared by that one country or particular country. Members included countries in Eastern Africa, except Djibouti, Sudan, and Egypt. Reasons are not known to me. The vision stated the only effective long-term answer to the conflicts over water is to align national water policies with the shared vision of good water management and define goals for cross-border cooperation. In fact, if you ask me, from my experience and involvement in the water sector so far, one of the areas to be sensitive and with potential conflict is this basin. I'm seeing more challenges there than challenges in water basin, for some reasons anyway. The Nile Basin Initiative countries that attended that meeting adopted the core IWRM principles, where water resources management would be based on a watershed or river basin approach, and stakeholder participation would be at the heart of water governance at all levels and help to resolve conflicts. As I said earlier, this is one one area where there is potential of conflicts to happen. But following the agreement, all riparian countries in the Nile Basin initiated water policy and legislation revisions. And they have amended their water policies and laws and restructured their institutions and governance frameworks accordingly. The national institutional development and reforms. I have here examples of countries which underwent institutional development reforms, of course, based on the international observations and approaches. And one of them is South Africa. Here I'm hoping to have some input because this is from the literature. So there could be new developments that have not been documented or have been documented, but I've not laid my hands on. One of them is South Africa. In South Africa, from the literature I consulted, indicates that institutions fall into three broad categories: the policy-making institutions, water supplying institutions, and the water consumer institutions. And that the policy making institutions often play a regulatory role in the management of water resources, and they are not directly involved in the provision and management of water resources. Those institutions are not directly involved in the provision of and management of water resources, but they are mainly manned by the government. And the supplying institutions include government department, parastatals, and NGOs. In Ethiopia, in 2000, the country passed its water resources management policy based on the IWRM principle and emphasized on the integrated framework for water resources development as a rural-centered decentralized management underpinning a participatory approach. You can see that Ethiopia's water policy is informed by the international community approach, and that was the IWRM. So, another country as a case in point is Kenya. again in 2002, okay. In Kenya, in 2002, they passed the Water Act, emphasizing again on the IWRM principles as the basis of water governance, and established the Water Resources Management Authority, which has the mandate to manage, regulate, and conserve all water resources, and to ensure stakeholder participation in order to enhance the equitable allocation of water and guarantee environmental sustainability. Now, just from these two cases in point, we are seeing that IWRM utilized the principle or approach, and of course within IWRM there is a stakeholder participation, but still in the two countries stakeholder participation has come out as an emphasis, much as it is embedded in the approach itself. And the Kenyan water policy represents a move away from the traditional ministerial top-down approach to water management towards a holistic management approach of both water resources and management and water services provision using participatory approach. Never mind the FAA, I don't know what it was. And in 2010, the new constitution was passed and the Water Act was revised to facilitate the devolving functions to newly established county governments, especially for water supply and sanitation. And then we have another case in point, and that is Uganda, which passed a Water Act way back in 1997 to provide for the use, protection, and management of water resources and supply, and also to provide the constitution of water and sewage authorities, and to facilitate the devotion of water supply and sewage undertakings. So basically theirs seems to have moved away from the centralized approach. Another reform or change that is documented from Uganda is that the national water policy was passed in 1999, which aimed to promote a new integrated approach to manage water resources in ways that are sustainable and most beneficial to the people of that country. But, you know, sometimes, hello?
Sorry, we got disconnected for a while.
Oh, okay. So are you back? Where do you want me to restart?
No, we can continue. No, you don't need to restart. We are not the primary target. It's Rennie. I was in the meeting, then I was pushed out, so now I've just rejoined. My apologies for the disturbance. Please continue, ma'am.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
We are slide 44. I think it's fine. The slide is 44. Uganda.
Yeah. But are we moving to 45, all of us?
Try to move.
Yes, I moved. That's 44. Now I'm on 45. You are stuck on 44.
I'm at 44 still.
Okay. I will do the trick that I've just learned today. Stop sharing and share again. Am I sharing something different? Jesus. This is 3. And it's supposed to go to 44. Uganda. Okay, now, are we on 45?
Not yet. You're not sharing yet, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Uganda.
Okay. We were there, all of us. And then when I moved to 44, 45, I left you on 44. Was that right?
Yes. Now you put this slideshow.
Ah, okay. 44.
Yes.
Yeah, what I was saying is, Uganda is not just an isolated case, but sometimes you find the Water Act or policy being passed, but when it comes into force, it will take some years. I don't know these matters of politics or operational, but it happens. And then we have a case of Rwanda, who formulated water and sanitation policy in 2004, and effort was placed on robust framework for the conservation, protection, and management of the country's water resources. And in 2008, Water Law number 62 was passed, and in 2011, the National Policy of Water Resources Management replaced that one of 2004. And their water law outlines an institutional framework for coordinating water resources management, devolves water resources management functions to districts and user organizations, and provides for charges to be levied for the use of water. That was Rwanda. So what we are seeing here in Rwanda is the devolvement of water resources functions to the lower level. And Burundi established new water legislation based on IWRM principle, but it did not introduce a catchment-based planning approach to water resources management. And at least based on a publication of 2013, Burundi is still in the centralized approach. But since we are scholars and you guys are doing your PhD, if you are interested more to find whether this is exactly what is happening now, you can try and research whether they have moved. Because so far, all the countries seem to go into seem to apply this decentralized approach. But this is an isolated case where the country opted for centralized approach. South Sudan. In 2012, South Sudan, as we all know, this is an emerging nation. As much as it's an emerging nation, it initiated a draft of new water regulations through Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, and the focus is on the regulation of water services provision as well as water resources management. And they decided to make use of the Water Act guideline. And then we have an example of Somalia, which initiated a national water policy in 2004, and also a new water regulations. And in 2012, it passed the Water Act as part of the state building process. And the national water policy, sets out objectives, general principles, and guidelines for developing the water sector. And the water policy was national water strategy was approved in 2004, and it outlined the priorities and detailed measures to permit the policy to be implemented. And water regulations that are currently being developed to enforce the Water Act, and the ministry issued a request to support a 20-year watershed management program that is according to a literature from Africa Water Facility. Eritrea. This one set out an action plan of IWRM for the IWRM-based approach on water resources policy that was drafted in and revised in 2007. And their policy actually recognized the drainage basin as the basic unit of planning for the development of water resources, and calls for appropriate measures to optimize utilization of this resource for the benefit of the people living in the basin. And it provides guidelines on management, development, and use of the national water resources. We have Djibouti as another example of a country which revised their water legislation, and this was done in 2000. And the priority of the Djibouti government was to enhance the water supply and sanitation sector. And in 2004, the National Water Resources Plan was developed, and it emphasized on the integrated approach to water resources management. And again, just like Kenya, I think, and Uganda and Ethiopia, stakeholder participation stood out explicitly. And in my own country, the National Water Policy and Water Resources Management Act meant to step forward toward IWRM implementation. So the country joins other countries that I've shared examples with in terms of the implementation of an IWRM approach. And this policy deals with the reforms to water resources management, urban and rural water supply, and sanitation. And the main aim of the policy is to provide a comprehensive framework for sustainable development and management of our water resources. And the policy stipulates the fact that achievement can be made through an effective legal and institutional framework implemented in a multi-stakeholder approach, rather than emphasizing that the government is the sole investor, implementer, and manager of water resources in both rural and urban areas, as it was the case in the period of 1967, which was about 6 years after independence, to 1970s. And those are the objectives of our water policy. The first one, it addresses cross-sectoral interests. The second is to lay foundation for sustainable development and management. And the third is to ensure full cost recovery, especially in urban areas. And the last one, to ensure full participation of beneficiaries in planning, construction, operation, maintenance, and management of community-based water supply schemes in rural areas. Again, in Tanzania, the issue of stakeholder participation comes out very clearly. And the policy also embodies the principle of water basin. That water basin should be the planning and management units rather than regions. But before the launch, the water sector had suffered from uncoordinated strategies and programs that often resulted in the unsustainable water utilization, threats to past investments in costly infrastructure, and ultimately satisfactory services. I think it makes sense when you have uncoordinated strategies and programs in place. You can't realize what you wish to. Most importantly in this slide is the fact that the Act prohibits human activities near water sources and protected water sources from pollution, erosion, and adverse effects. But I don't know in other countries, but in Tanzania you travel, and in some areas, in rural setting, you find actually people conducting agricultural activities very close to water sources. And honestly speaking, the country is big, and the extent to which actors can actually reach out to such places and take action remains questionable. Last year, the country, especially the capital city, not capital, actually, it's the commercial city of Dar es Salaam, went for almost 3 weeks in water crisis. But what came up as the reason for that is in the catchment areas, people were busy doing agricultural activities, but also they had livestock around there. And it's not clear whether nobody noticed when it started, but finally the impact hit so many people. So sometimes having institutional management in place is one thing, but follow-up, especially in the what might be perceived as hard to reach areas, can jeopardize actually the entire process. So we as practitioners should also remember that there are places to be visited, probably not so easy to reach, but if those places are not visited regularly to ensure people are doing what is expected of them, then we all are at the risk of suffering the consequences of action of a certain group or action of people from certain place. This is the graph. It's way too congested, but basically it shows you the minister responsible for water. There are water bodies, and then there are basin water bodies. There are national water bodies. There is one national water body, but basin water body, I'm sure there are many. Catchment water committees must be more than one. Subcatchment water committees, water user associations, and water users. It's a bit complex. I just hope those who are in this arrangement are able to be coordinated and each one of them doing what is expected of them. And then an example of South Africa, again, as I said earlier on, faith can come to my rescue or can be of help, or another from who knows South African situation currently, but literature that I visited informed me of what I'm going to share with you. So countries in Africa, apart from the ones I mentioned, like the ones in the Nile Basin, have also reformed and amended their policies and acts. In South Africa particularly, they voted their National Water Act in 1998, and then the National Water Resources Strategy in 2000. Zambia amended theirs in 1994, its Water Act 1997, while Mozambique in 1995, Namibia in 2004. In South Africa, the Water Act of 1998 promotes integrated and decentralized water resources management, and of course, then new constitutional environment. The Act proposed a radically different framework with respect to previous national water laws, particularly with regards to the rights to water. Of course, we all know the history of South Africa, so it makes sense for them to have a radical change in terms of how the water, right to water is concerned. So under the new National Water Act, water is considered a public resource, and only the rights to use but not own water are granted to users through a licensing system for which users are required to pay. But I think in many countries, people get license to use water and not to own. Can I hear some comments from other, from colleagues, from participants from other countries? Do you know of these water user associations? Do you know of an example where water license is issued to somebody to own water? Or is just like in South Africa and for instance in my own country, where you get license to use water after you pay, and it has a timeline, as opposed to you being licensed to own. Can we have some discussion around this topic?
Hello, Doc. Hello, Prof.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in Zambia, you get a license to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so previously, it applied only to surface water.
Mm-hmm.
But now, there's been some extensions. Like to drill a borehole, now you need to apply for permission.
Mm-hmm.
An assessment has to be done to ensure that the location is good. You won't affect neighbors in terms of quantities and all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that for boreholes, it's just a permit. They
Mm-hmm.
haven't yet started charging us like on a yearly basis. But for surface water, you get a permit per annum. So you need to apply for the quantity of water you need every year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the water body, it's called WAMA, Water Resources Management Authority, will study your application and grant you some rights for that particular year.
Mm-hmm.
So it extends to cases where one would want, say, to construct a dam. So you've got a farm, you want to construct a dam on your farm, you have to apply, because once you put up that embankment, it will affect flow on the downstream side. Yes, so I think it's working well so far, and it's improving management to ensure that everyone benefits.
Thank you, Mombe. Your contribution with regards to the permit, for instance, on borehole also applies to Tanzania. You need just a permit, and as you're saying, I think it's a good thing. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a regulatory body that gives permission, and therefore, if that cannot be in place, then you find everyone would just have borehole, and maybe some people can have even more than one, because others are using water from boreholes for business. So what you shared is actually what is happening also in my country. And also you talked about the license to use only surface water. Even this one, we have it in Tanzania, this practice as well. Any other contribution? No contribution. Should we move on? Okay. I hope I'll be able to move my slides on your part. So, are we on 59? Hello?
We are on 60.
You're on 60. Yeah.
Yes.
Again, I have to stop sharing and then share again. Are we on 59?
Yes.
Okay, now we go to 60. We finished 60. Excuse me. Literature informs us of one of the major feature of policy in South Africa, which was decentralization of water management through the establishment of catchment levels and water management institutions, such as catchment management agencies and also the water user associations. And finally, protective measures are meant to secure water allocation for basic human needs and ecological and development purposes. So the concept of reserve was introduced. And then they have a water resource strategy, which is the implementation of the strategy for the national water and provides the legal binding framework within which water resources in South Africa should be managed. And the main of their water strategy is to match the balance water demand with the water supply. And in terms of water services provision, in 1994, the government published the first white paper on water and sanitation policy, which led to Water Service Act of 1977. And the act calls for higher cost recovery, as was mentioned before, which proved a challenge due to widespread poverty and a culture of non-payment for water in many townships as a remnant of protests against apartheid. Higher water tariffs and rigorous cutoff for non-payment or flow reduction through the installation of tricklers that allow only a very limited flow of water imposed hardships on the poorest. So the Act also modified the role of water bodies because water bodies have historically been the only bulk water providers. Municipalities were obliged to buy water through them. And the act allowed municipalities to develop their bulk water supply infrastructure or to buy bulk water from providers other than water boards. Conversely, it also allowed water boards to provide retail water services at the request of municipalities. And since the act was passed, the capacity of both water boards and many water service providers increased significantly. And the provision of water supply and sanitation services is also regulated by the national government, represented by the Department of Water Affairs as a policy settler. So this slide basically explains what is happening within water boards. And these are state-owned boards which play a key role in South African water sector, and they operate dams, bulk water supply infrastructure, some retail infrastructure, and some wastewater systems. And some provide technical assistance to municipalities. On the part of municipalities, according to the Constitution, the Municipal Structures Act and Water Service Act of 1997, responsibility for provision of water and sanitation services lies within municipalities. So the national government can also assign responsibility for service provision to local municipalities. And the private sector participation literature informs that since 1994, some municipalities have involved the private sector in the service provision in various forms, including contracts for specific services such as wastewater treatment, short-term management contracts, and long-term concessions. Research, training, and knowledge. South Africa has a fairly strong research and training infrastructure in the water sector. There is the Water Research Commission, which supports water research and development, as well as building a sustainable water research capacity in the country. Now, talking about the research in water, I think this is highly commendable in South Africa, because having a water research commission is a good thing to have, especially given the importance of water in our lives. But I don't know of any other country that has a water research commission which supports actually research and development. Do we have an example from any country? At least in my own country, we don't have water research commission. Does any of us have something to share, or is just South Africa as it stands? Do we even have research components in water issues in our countries specifically?
Hello? Not specifically for water, but like in the case of Zambia, we've got something, and we've got a ministry of Technology and something. They give out more like funding, research which can bring benefits, but they've spread it out. It's not specifically water related. But if you have a project in water, which I believe has got a lot of benefits, one can get some funding. It's relatively new, so the funding isn't that big compared to what happens in South Africa. But at least I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Mumbe. Any other contribution? In Tanzania also we have.
May I?
Yes, Catherine, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm aware of the contribution that the SADC countries make in the water sector through the WaterNet Regional Research Center. So it's like the various ministries, water ministries in the SADC countries, Botswana, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and the like. They all report water issues and water development through this SADC WaterNet body. Yeah.
So they get funding from there as well.
I'm
not
not too sure about the funding, but I know research on water and ideas and issues concerning water are being shared in that regional body, the SADC WaterNet. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Catherine. Yeah. Any other contribution? In Tanzania, we have something probably close to what they have in Zambia. It's just a commission for research, and they put up adverts calling for proposals, and then you apply. In most cases, they would have their priority areas, but water can make a focus area in many calls. But we don't have something specific like the one South Africans have. Any other contribution? No? Okay, I will continue. And I'm sure it won't show again until I close and reopen. Are we on 69? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
We're on 69, eh? Have we moved it to 68? No.
No.
All right. I'll close and share again. Are we on 68?
Yes.
Okay, and then 9.
Yes.
And then 70. So the Water Research Center in South Africa serves as the water-centered knowledge hub, leading to creation, dissemination, and application of water-centered knowledge, focusing on water resources management, water-linked ecosystems, water use, and wastewater management, and water utilization in agriculture. They also have the Water Institute for Southern Africa, which is a professional association that keeps members abreast of the latest developments in water technology and research through its national and international liaison links and affiliation. There are financiers and promoters. For instance, the Development Bank of Southern Africa is one of the important players in the water sanitation sector, both as a financier and as an advisor and project promoter. Again, this is highly commendable because I don't know of any country which has a bank that is a central financier and promoter. And for this particular bank, for example, in 2005 and 2006, about 29% of their approved budget, were for water supply and sanitation. Other financing institutions in the sector include the Infrastructure Finance Corporation Limited, which claims to be the only 100% privately owned infrastructure debt fund in the world, and this is found in South Africa. There's also the civil society which come into the equation, and in South Africa, there's a vibrant civil society comprising of a large number of NGOs with very diverse goals, membership, and methods. And they are actively engaged in ensuring adequate provision of sanitation services of acceptable standards. So this brings me to the end of my presentation today. I have saved us about 40 minutes or so, but we can engage in discussion based on what I presented today or yesterday and day before. Karibu, welcome. Hello. Hello. Am I alone?
No, Prof, we are with you.
Oh.
Yeah,
that Rennie has spoken. Maybe you can email me what I might call instructions on the group assignment. I don't know how to deliver that. I send them through email, and then maybe they send me their response. Maybe you can guide me, probably not while they're listening, or if you don't mind.
I'll call soon after the meeting, then we can touch base on how best to strategize around it. But they're also in attendance. They are noting, colleagues. That group assignment is something that Prof would want you to prioritize. Please, let's take note of it. It's part of the learning. We also learn from each other. But it's okay, Prof. I'll touch base with you after the meeting.
Thank you very much, Rennie.
Thank you. I'm actually about to log off, Prof. I've got a meeting from 12:30, so I'll have to recuse myself. My apologies that I can't stay the course.
Thank you. Thank you also for staying on while you have other things to do. And
no, this is important. To have my whole principal talking to our students is humbling and an honor. So we also need to show up and take full advantage of this platform. So thank you so much, Prof.
Pleasure, but I'm still the same principal, but still the same,
Yeah, you are my dada after the call on this platform. You're my principal.
And you're my director. All right, I'll let you go. We touch base. Don't forget to give me bits and bits on how to conduct the group assignment, please.
No, that is in order. I'll actually, I'm actually with Dr. Mabuko as we speak. She will follow through and get in touch soon after this call.
Okay, thank you. You enjoy the
Thank
rest
you,
of
ma'am.
the day, and bye.
You too, ma'am.
Okay,
Bye,
thank-
colleagues.
Bye.
Bye.
Petrus, today you have a
Prof?
background that is very fancy. Oh, yes, please. Somebody.
MS Teams.
Yes, please.
Oh,
Somebody address me. Yes, please.
I was just gonna thank you for the work that your work that you shared with us. It
Mhm.
was quite informative and we learned a lot. I think going forward we'll really need to get ourselves acquainted with our institutional framework in the sector that we're dealing with, which is the water sector, the
Mhm.
legislatures and the policies which will guide us in developing our even our thesis to be stronger and aligned accordingly. So this was really, really good and we appreciate.
Thank you very much. It pleases me. When you take time to prepare something and then it makes sense and be appreciated, you feel good and motivated to do even better. Thank you very much for the appreciation. And you have my email. Dr. Mabuku, do people have my email?
No.
No, you can share with them in the course of doing their research, their write-up. If anyone, of course, I know they have their supervisors, or they will have, or they already have. But just in the context of the seminar that I have shared with them, if anyone wishes to, to get a comment or something from me, all of you kindly feel free. You can get my email from Dr. Mabuku.
Thank you, Prof.
And reach out to me. I'm one of the resourceful person within the region, so just like you are. So we should have doors open for each other for the betterment of what we are doing for the region and also our individual countries.
Thank you very much, Prof.
You're welcome. That's Catherine. And thank you. Thank you, Petrus. Thank you, everybody. So do we have anything to say, and Jimmy, I see you clapping. Do we have anything to share, Tafila?
Prof, we still don't, Prof.
Yeah.
I think these notes and the one for yesterday, we still don't have these notes.
I'll share them to, is it Ronel? Dr. Mabuku, guide me. Do I send them to Ronel, or because do I have your email, Dr. Mabuku? Guide me where I can. I don't know how to. Can I deposit them in this forum? I don't know.
I think Dr. Mabuku is not in the call anymore.
Oh, okay. I can send them to Remy.
Ronel.
Ronel, yeah, Ronel. I'll send them to Ronel. Let me just make note of it.
Okay.
I will do that. My apologies.
Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome. So I saved your time and my time. So should we say goodbye for now and we do our own things, or do we want to be stuck and try to figure out what to converse?
I think it's a goodbye for now. Then you said tomorrow is with Prof. Mashauri from tomorrow.
Tomorrow and day after, yes.
Okay.
Because I will be away. Actually, I'm traveling in the next 2 hours to Dar es Salaam. For those who know Tanzania, I have a meeting with the Treasury Registrar tomorrow and day after tomorrow.
I think Mr. Tafila, you can please go ahead and offer appreciation to Prof. Since Dr. Mabuku, I don't think she was in the call. Mr. Tafila, maybe just go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Petros. I think Ms. Catherine touched base on that. I would just also maybe extend my appreciation to your 3-day lecture series that you had with us. Like Catherine has said, it's really nice to be acquainted with some of these regulations. For myself, coming from the geoscience field and with almost zero background on laws and all that, it's really quite interesting. I was chatting with Catherine on the side to say, I think, when we're asking about the contributions and all that from whatever is happening in our countries, it's not that we were actually ignoring your call to contribute. It's just that we are kind of blank, know a little, but with this knowledge, I think it has sparked some interest in some of us who are new in this policies, legislatives, and institutional framework business. So I think it will go a long way into helping us even deliver when we are done with our PhD. So I think it was a really a good lecture series. So thank you, Prof, for your time.
I appreciate that, Tafila, and I understand the limits. But I'm also pleased to find out that I have opened doors for you to go and try to see what is happening in your respective countries in the context of these rules, regulations, and policies. So quite understandable what you said, and acceptable as well. And for me, it was a great honor to be able to share with the brilliant young people within the region, and I look forward to touching base here and there. And have you seen the call for our upcoming WaterNet conference that will happen in Zanzibar?
Yeah, we have seen it. So I think maybe we are at our own times. We are working towards that. I'm not quite sure on the progress of the other colleagues, but I think with WaterNet is experience last year, because I was like attending it for the first time last year. It actually provided room for collaborating and networking with experts in the region. So yeah, I think with the call of the abstracts, we'll do something about it. I think maybe also it will also help us to present something that we would have had a significant milestone on in terms of our research work, maybe our first 1 or 2 objectives. Since we are done with our proposals, some are just about to complete. So I think there's still room for us to contribute on that call for abstracts.
I would encourage you to, and especially if you can also get some funding to attend. They are very good forums, as you're saying. You get to benefit from presentations that people make, but you most importantly also get to network and to get to know people within the region and beyond in the area of water. So if time allows you and you are able to get fund, I would encourage you, and I look forward to meeting you in Zanzibar.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we're done. So I'll be out, and I wish you all the best and keep the good work that you are doing. I understand the PhD has a lot of hurdles, but you see that contributes to the value once you get your title. We have all been through the same journey, and one of my supervisors actually encouraged me. He said, "Don't worry." When I met, challenges that seemed to be difficult to address, he said, "Esther, remember, this is just like a master's, but it takes a little more effort and a little longer." So I kept on moving things. Oh, okay. If I did a master's, why can't I do a PhD? It takes a little more effort and it takes a little longer. So I would like to share the same sentiment and wish all the best.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye, and I'm out now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Prof.
Kila mtu alikuwa na thermos yake. It's just for you.